Iran's entire economic system collapses in a year. And I think that is exactly what's going to happen. So I am not concerned about Iran in an industrial power projection sense. I'm far more concerned about what the implications of what happens when a country of 80 million people can't import sufficient food and fertilizer to feed themselves. So, like with China, I am far more concerned with Iranian weakness than strength. Turkey's very different. Turkey is self-sufficient for most of the things you need for modern life. The one thing it doesn't have is energy, but it borders countries that have it. And it's got a partner in Azerbaijan, which is not too far away. So I see the Turks having to establish, as you said, a neo-imperial system to make sure that that works. But honestly, they're already getting along really well with the Kurds of Iraq. So I don't think that's a very heavy carry for them. As for the nature of Erdogan, the president, yes, he is a bit of a jerk. And he is interested in kind of a regeneration of Ottoman power, which is both secular and religious. He's interested in both. And I would say a lot of people within Turkey see the world the same way. Remember that Turkey is not Western. It also is not Arabic. It is its own thing. Turkey is a fundamentally independent civilization, and they are very proud of that, and they should be. Moving forward, it also means they are going to be one of the few bastions of stability, but that means they're going to go doing it their own way. So the Eastern Mediterranean will basically become a Turkish lake. I expect the Israelis to buddy up as a junior alliance partner with the Turks because the Americans are nowhere to be seen. And how the two of them interface with Saudi Arabia will really determine the tenor of this region. And at the moment, the Saudis and the Israelis get along famously. So I can see this tripartite arrangement in the region where those three call the shots and everyone else is stomped on. It will take them 20 years to kind of set that up. But once that is done, the question is, where do they turn their attention to next? For the Turks, it would probably be to the northwest and the Balkans. I mean, again, I don't think this is going to be an imperial expansion of old because we don't have the ten balance. And in a world where the Germans are no longer functioning, the EU in itself is going to be in severe danger. And if you're Bulgaria and Romania in that scenario, you look at Turkey doing just fine, and you're like, hey, you know what? We have food surpluses. Is that something you're interested in? I can see the basis for an association based on Turkey, just like the French will be doing it further west. I wouldn't rule it out. It's entirely possible. This part of the world has a lot of history. But I don't think it has to go that way. In fact, if the Israelis and the Saudis and the Turks can prove to have a mutually beneficial relationship, I can totally see Sofia and Bucharest asking to join that association. Yeah, no, I think you're right. The question is whether or not a war would actually potentially achieve something for them. So in the case of the Russians, part of the reason why the Ukraine war is happening is the Russians are trying to secure themselves a better perimeter that is more defensible in anticipation of their demographic collapse. And the points that they need to plug to prevent invasion are, unfortunately for the Ukrainians, on the other side of Ukraine, ergo the war. I can see lots of places where that sort of logic, whether it's for economic, strategic reasons, holds true. And I think we will see dozens of brushfire wars as people feel forced to take matters into their own hands. Not all of the world is going to look like that. So I am very concerned about the African continent writ large. And I am very concerned about the countries that are on the Chinese and the Russian peripheries, because these are places where the historical angst is significant and the integration to this point has been relatively one way. And whether it's out of operation or desperation or opportunity, I do see a lot of people reaching for the gun. But I don't think that's going to happen everywhere. In places, for example, the Turkish example that we just explored, there are a number of power centers that see an advantage to working together, especially in a world where the United States is no longer managing things. Now, if you don't get along with Israel or Saudi Arabia or Turkey, look out. So like the future of Iran and Syria and Yemen and Iraq and Jordan in this environment, gets very scary. And whether or not you think that is a plus or a minus, of course, depends upon how you view the region now. Well, the money that went to foreign countries, to my understanding, and I have not dissected this apparently to the level you have, were mostly for vaccines. And the economic benefits would have been indirect via American consumer purchases of things like electronics, because all of a sudden we all needed a home office. And the United States does not do the bulk of the computing and telephony manufacturing business. Most of that is in East Asia. As for trade as usual, that really wasn't an option, especially in 2020 with lockdowns being the norm. And as Asia opened up in 2021, wow, the health cost of that was significant. Now that we're in the end of 2022 and pretty much everyone in the world has a combination of natural immunity and vaccinated immunity, we're in a better situation now. But I try not to be too hard on the policymakers who are dealing with an unprecedented situation. It's not like we had any examples in human memory of how to handle something like COVID. We were literally making it up as we went. And I don't think local government officials get enough credit. I mean, did we all make the right decisions every single time? Of course not. But there was no playbook. And everybody did the best that they could, in my opinion. Sure. In the world before World War II, from Reconstruction to World War II, the United States just went on this massive growth spurt because we were metabolizing basically a continent worth of resources. Our population was expanding greatly, and we were reaching out to establish trade links with other countries. Sometimes we weren't very kind about it, but it generated the fastest economic growth we had ever known. And it was going hand in hand with the early industrialization process. World War II stopped that. We stopped that on purpose because we found out that with a world that was in the atomic age, that sort of expansion would trigger conflicts. And anyway, there were other power centers in the Eastern Hemisphere who had their own ideas about how things would go, and one of them was the Soviet Union. So containment bubbled up. And in order to build the alliance, we had to sacrifice a lot economically, because otherwise we would have been militarily occupying the entire world. We found out in Iraq, again, that we're not very good at doing that when it's only one country. Can you imagine doing it for 100? I mean, there's nothing about that would have worked. So we tamped down our economic opportunities in order to encourage the economic opportunities of other places. But that era is now coming to an end. And if the United States is somewhat unconstrained and can focus more on its own economic interests, then we kind of go back to where we were in the 1910s and the 1920s, just with a much larger economy, with a much more powerful military, and a much higher technological base. At the same time, most of the rest of the world is stagnating and falling.